Welcome to the UN CEFACT Global Trust Registry project. We are meeting on the Thursday in Australia. I think it's where you are too, Alina. Good morning. And Thursday even where what I will do very quickly, remind us, not that we need reminding, but of the working on the UN CEFACT rules to do with IPR and development processes, which I'm sure we each are very familiar with. What we want to do today is look through some of the work that Sagasha and I have been doing on the changes to the content, the documents that we've been working on. Talk about one fairly chunky change to document names and ordering that I want to see what you both think, and then listen to your suggestions, Alina, about future changes to content. These were the meetings a few weeks ago. I think, Alina, you weren't able to attend the meetings from this date of the week, the Thursday of the week. Basically, we had a few, half a dozen people, I think.
Yes.
And Harman were on the call. Usual sort of coverage, I suppose, about discussions. One of the things, as you can see in that first paragraph of text that was discussed, was the idea that rather than any word country or nation or other types of phrases, we should be quite precise and use the UN member state phrase. And that's one of the changes that we've gone through in the last couple of weeks to sort of try and make sure that throughout the documentation there's that use of the term. On the Friday, we had a revisit, I suppose, discussion around identifiers and containers, and the idea that DIA is not a new identifier; it's not a new construct. It would enclose existing identifiers. So the we build work, the EID from Europe, Life LEIs, whatever else, it would be within a DIA. We had a very interesting either Hans or Harman, probably Harman, I think, on whether you'd want to have more than one DIA issue or a DIA with several identifiers inside it. That's a live discussion. We don't necessarily fix it yet. And then I want to go to the Sagashan. You had a nice issues that are a good way of looking at it. So which one you just had?
I think you can do the same if you share the screen. So expand the child item thing, and there we are.
Okay. So this issue, Alina, was the one that we had a solicited. I asked Thailand to give us a review. Rector, a globally known NATA accredited individual, he's a great guy, but he gave us a sort of, he was working on many of the UN CEFACT projects, and he gave us sort of feedback relevant at the point in time he was reading the document, at which point we had about 4 different files with about the project in them and all sorts of other things. So he gave us a number of comments, which then Sagashan broke down into issues. Say, okay, here all your comments, will sort of snap them into pieces and have them as a separate issue. So what we've been doing, Sagashan and I, is going through those issues. So that's been quite a bit of the work we've done. So, for example, redesign the PCR introductory diagram for clarity. I think in this one you had. Yes, so these are the points that Brett raised, and what we now have is a diagram like that. It has no key at the bottom that doesn't have the blue text on the left. We still have the explainer text that says how that diagram works, but it's a kind of cleaner representation. And I've also put UN member state at the top of each of these things, not have nation. So that's an example of one of the changes we did to sort of address the comments that Brett raised. Oh gosh, now it's gone to this view. Go back again. Go into meta issue. So we have a few remaining issues from Brett's review, but we've done quite a lot of work. So Sankash has done a great deal of work on the economic argument. I've removed some things like from the last phrase, but a lot of work has been done to simplify that economic argument and present it in less technical terms and so on, and to sort of break out the technical details into a separate document. And what we were talking about, just as you came on, Alina, is we think now these remaining Brett review comments need to be sort of treated not as a fact about the now new text. They're a statement of fact about the previous version of the text. And what we should do is use the remaining open issues as a sort of sanity check. Yeah. For example, looking at this issue, does the new text clarify and standardize the GTR-DIA relationship? In other words, are we confident now that the text doesn't have that issue? And that's what I think we're doing with these remaining issues, is to use them as a kind of a check against the current documentation to see whether that is still valid and whether we still need to do it.
But overall, I had a look at particularly at the section 4 or the 4th document. I don't know if you have it around.
Of course. This one.
Yes, I think overall it is totally aligned with the UN governance principles. Though I would add a few things. So in the first place, I think I would clarify the notion of authoritative register, because the current text refers to entities that are recognized by their national governments as competent authorities. As from a legal certainty perspective, it may be useful, maybe in my opinion, to clarify that for grid purposes, what an authoritative register is, so that it is understood as a public authority established by law.
That's cool. That's cool. Slow down for a second. Yes, the answer is yes. Yes, it should. And what I'm looking at is I don't see a nation thing at word. I see a UN member state in here. So if there's a nation word left in here, it needs to be fixed. But we also have a glossary. So the glossary is where things like authoritative registrar.
Okay, many.
So rather than repeat them in every file,
yes,
we have a glossary. So those terms are defined once and once only, which is a bit like the Brett Highland challenge about
this is it.
various things. Yeah.
Then, as well, on the other hand, I would distinguish authoritative register from any sorts of administrative database, because one of the potential long-term risk is that with the current level of abstraction that we are using, the eligibility criteria would also apply to any sorts of public database that do not actually perform a true registry function, as we were talking for just as an example about Glaive. So rather than excluding anyone, I think a balanced approach would be to introduce a sort of prioritization criteria, for example, by giving priority to registries whose records have constructive or declarative legal effects under their national law. I don't know how you see it, because as it is structured at the moment, we would actually include any sort of entity in this concept, as long as it's
another really good point. Really good point again, and so I want to sort of explore that for a bit, because I think it's essential. You've very clearly, and I think it's still in this document, described authoritative registrars as being the legally recognized operating body of the nations, of the United Nations member state, and so on, right? So we have a fairly good set of criteria to say the type of entity that is considered, the type of registry. One of the conversations 2 weeks ago was we should actually narrow our scope sensibly to begin with and say, for example, maybe it's business entities and land registries at the moment. And that because you're right. If we ignore the confusion of having Goliath or other things included, which we don't want to, they don't satisfy the authority registrar test.
I'm just thinking, because imagine like when public authority registers would see in this list or directory other or all sorts of entities, maybe they will decide not to sign up to avoid confusion.
Yeah. So
They say, oh, then we're out because we don't want to be on the same stage or level like other sorts of entities which are not not a register at the end.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. Your concern is valid. I'm not disagreeing with the concern. I think we have some checks to prevent that concern from even now being possible. So Goliath cannot get into this grid because Goliath is not an authoritative registrar of the United Nations member state. Full stop.
It was just an example. Imagine it might be a cadastre, which is sort of a legal institution of under national law, but though it's not a register.
Yeah. So if
it's like an administrative entity, which is also
so
public.
If a United Nations member state recognizes cadastre as the authoritative registrar of their land, then they could be in, but it has to be that way around, right?
Yes.
So if a nation, a UN member state says our thing that you are interested in from a supply chain point of view is operated or registered by entity, then we can recognize that for their jurisdictional interest, but not
correct
for the world, right? It's like it puts it in the right context. Like a UN member state has decided that this thing is their authoritative registry of, and it's the way they manage it. But,
and I was also concerned about another requirement, which is explicitly reflected, for example, in the European Union, in the European countries, in the Directive 2025. So it is one of these main requirements is this legality check. Of course, it applies to all European member states. About the rest, I don't know. So here I have a doubt about this listing or not this requirement, this legality check.
Again, I think it's a good thing. I suspect we have that legal. The UN is thinking about UN member states. That's its unit of decision and thinking. The European Union is a collection of UN member states. And it can collectively decide which means that all of the 29 plus, I don't know, of the UN member states are that's okay, that's cool. But we don't recognize the EU as a UN member state.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean? It's not a UN member state. The EU is not a UN member state.
No. Clear. Okay, so as far as I see, you suggest that the only requirement listed should be that it is an authoritative register. Wait a second, how it was exactly written in the document.
So I think the glossary could be improved here because we
number 4, admission and eligibility requirements. So grid membership is restricted to UN member states. Application and participation is voluntary, obviously. Authoritative status mandatory. Legal mandate. The applicant must provide a verifiable link to the national legislation or statutory decree that establishes them as authoritative register in their jurisdiction. And then a second, sovereign recognition. Must be recognized by their national government as a competent authority. Okay. Accountability must designate a permanent point of contact. I don't understand exactly. Responsible for the accuracy of the metadata listed in the grid. What would this point of contact be in then?
So it's another great question. So if we look to working examples of systems like this, like ICAO's PKD system, when that's running, it's necessary for the EK or PKD operators to be able to know who to talk to, who's the authoritative person to talk to in the participants' sort of operation, so that they can clarify issues with, in their case, public key submission and other things. For us, we'd need to know who is the authority, who is working with authority to kind of speak for you in either all your registries or each registry may have a point of contact that you want us to recognize as the person to speak to about that registry.
Okay, and now I just have another question on my mind. Looking again at this requirement point for number 2, first of all, legal mandate. Then what kind of authoritative registers do we refer to? Do you remember Steve's question about the honey registers? So imagine would be would have an
honey registers are out. We're not accommodating Steve's request. Steve's request is that we create a pattern that is repeatable. Steve is going to take the pattern of the grid and take it to the honey makers of the world and say, and so
but would we need to specify exactly what sort of authoritative registers do we want to include, or do you think it's not necessary? As you were saying about the bicycle register.
That is an excellent question. They've all been excellent questions. That's another excellent question. So one of the simplifications that Herman and Hans were keen to prosecute 2 weeks ago was that even if we consider only authoritative registrars from UN member states, and we are interested in supply chain type information, there's still a lot of registrars and a lot of registries and a lot of types of data. And their suggestion was, in the first release of GRID, perhaps you focus on 1 or 2 types of registry. One might be company or organization identity, and the second might be land, because of course you're a land expert, Alina, so we would have a good source for land concept, right?
I was thinking about your bicycle register. Would we include it?
No, so the UCI, love them though I do, they're not a UN member state. So they can't. Nor can FIFA, the World Soccer Association, nor can any of these, right? They're in a different plane, particularly FIFA.
Okay.
But so I think we're clear. I think it's what you started us on the path of, Alina.
Okay, so my question is, would you list the authoritative registers we want to include, or you think it's not necessary? Just to leave it open.
Criteria. So this is an open invitation to UN member states, and the criteria are: 1, that you're a UN member state and you're interested, and 2, that you have authoritative registrars in your domain that you'd like to have listed in the grid.
Okay.
We don't need to list. We can list the type of registrars that we anticipate in the first instance starting. But what should happen, I think, is this becomes you described a governance model in this document, right? In that governance model, the participants have a say about the future of the grid. So the participants and the operating sort of model say, we now want to include maritime vessels inside the grid. We now want to, and they go, okay, well, that's a bit more extra stuff to do. It might be an extra fee or whatever. There's a discussion about how to do that, but then they do it, right? So we started it with something that is self-evidently true. Organization ID, and these seem to be obvious. Country of origin and company, they seem to be very so the rest of it can grow organically.
Okay, so you would not specify.
I would say that we recommend that path, that it starts with 1 or 2 types of data in the registry, and then it's types of data in the registry, and then it grows according to demand and interest of the participants.
And then further on, we would include the bicycle register.
No, never, no. because they're not a UN member state. So the They just don't get in.
Nor the handbag registers.
No handbag, no FIFA, no.
Unfortunately, okay. So
They're not the right type of thing. So I think it's good to hear you feel that this is a lot shorter than document 4. I think it's a good time to show you something, to share something else I wanted to share, because the list is on in front of you. I've got a double screen effect in front of you right now. And on the left-hand side, we've been scrolling around document number 4. Right? And this structure here, you see, I'm trying to highlight it with my the structure here is the one we basically developed when we first drew a diagram and labeled some stuff that we need to create, and we gave it number 1 or something. And I don't think it's now the most obvious ordering to see documents in. So this particular structure had the first document in the way I've done it was economic argument. And then we straight away went to quality of registrar data, which would give people like Brett confusion. Why am I reading about that before I even know what a grid is? So what I wanted to do was to reorder these documents in a way that made more sense and give them better names. And that's what I've tried to do on this one. You're looking on the right-hand side as a local build of the website, so it hasn't been merged into the main document, where I've said, okay, the first document will still be economic argument. Then we're going to talk about what document 4. It still has a number, so it's number 4. But the legal governance, so I reckon the most important thing after does it make economic sense is what is it and how does it work?
Yes.
The third thing, what are you doing about those DIA things?
I liked pretty much how we call it, like a trust wrapper, because we avoid confusions with, another identifier. Yeah.
So there's a bunch of things I'm trying to improve, and then I've got the good work of Sankshan coming in as annexes. So Sankshan, I called your technical reference in grid DIA an Annex A. Then I've got an Annex B for your hypothetical ROI. And I've made the economic argument for portion research C and the glossary D. And then I've got the archive documents at the end. And I think if we're looking at the website, that is a much more logical.
Makes sense.
What do you think, Sankshan?
I think this is good. Personally, I'm more interested in us being able to sort of, from this point on forward, ensure that we are reviewing the content on the website and realizing that we have a checklist against which we review the content and strive for clarity rather than adding more unless it is really required.
Okay.
Agree. And what do you think about the section? I am striving for clarity, by the way, and I haven't
clarity. I love this word, clarity.
Sankshan's a great guy. What I suggest I do is this is a merge request. So if I go back to the technical stuff that underpins these Git environments, there's a merge request. So this is the merge request I created called better ordering of documents. And it fixes, in my opinion, it fixes an issue with the names of documents. Now, I've been doing a lot of work in the background. I've just noticed I've got some conflicts. I don't know whether or not they're real conflicts, but what I would do once I found out that's a real issue is basically to apply that merge, which would change the names of the documents.
Okay.
What do you think, Sankshan?
So I have. Are you planning to resolve the conflict? Are there actual conflicts, or this is hallucination of the system?
Can you just mute for a sec? Okay. Wow. Okay. Say again, Sankshan.
Are these real conflicts, or is this hallucination of the system?
So I have created an issue. Where do I click on the issue? Okay. I created an issue in the issue register number 29, where I sort of listed the current order in which documents are presented, and then proposed how I would swap document number 2 and number 4 in the order in which they're seen, and I can change the title, of course, as well.
Yeah, I just saw that. I think, yeah, I think these are good, but why do you have a merge check failing is something we might want to figure out.
Well, because I've been doing lots of other squirreling around, I suspect I've got something in a twist somewhere, but I don't want to solve that on the call. I don't know why it's come up with that.
But all right. So I think in principle, this is actually something that should be merged and done.
Yeah. So okay, good. I'll take on that action after the call, and I'll find out why there's a conflict. But what we should end up with is on the same list we're looking at on the right-hand side here, this sort of ordering of documents. And what I also suggest I do, no AI is listening to us and making a transcript, is make the number of the document that is presented sensible, or the title of the document. We don't necessarily need number 4s and stuff anymore. So economic argument, it's just called economic argument. This one is called 04, legal and target operating model. I think we could just call it legal and target operating model, not 04 anymore. We don't need the number. And that doesn't have a number anyway. So I think I can just I can just do a little bit more tidying up as well and get rid of the prefix of a number before the document name.
So you suggest to delete all the numbers then, or?
That sounds scary. No, I suggest to rename the document. If you want to see, the numbers are still very much present, kind of, right? So if we look at the way we have to make the Docusaurus list things, that's the way I've see these funny numbers at the front of them.
Yes, I have seen that. Yes, I have seen
those force Docusaurus to list things in the order of those numbers. Now, Sankashan created 2 files with N and N at the beginning of them, which meant that they came after the archive. If you look at, you got archive documents, and you got these 2 documents here. So that was one of the things I wanted to rejig, was to rename the files that Sankashan produced so that they have numbers and not letters at the beginning. It's kind of weird, but anyway, it makes the right effect. There are lots of numbers still. I'm not deleting them all. Now does that make sense? Okay, there's a big merge to do. I think, Alina, pull your attention back to if Sankashan and I untangle the mess I've made. Untangle it, and send you a message saying it's clean again, and then maybe you can have another look at with the way you were doing before about the.
Sorry, could you repeat that again? I didn't
I'm
understand.
Suggesting that I do the merge that we were describing, and you've seen, and I'll untangle the blockers. We then send a message to everybody saying that the new document layout is available for review.
Yes.
And we then, Sankashan and I or others, can go through that list of issues that's still open to check that the new content satisfies the issue that was raised.
Okay.
And then we'll issue as we've gone through.
Okay.
So, for example, one of the issues I believe I've picked, but may not have, is that there aren't any mentions of nation state, but only UN member state and other.
For me, this is correct. We refer to UN member states.
Yeah, exactly, and it's much.
I have seen it specifically. Yes.
Yeah, so it sort of turns out that nation state has meanings beyond what I intended.
My only question was that if we would need to specify exactly what sort of authoritative registers we refer to, or we leave it as an open.
My suggestion is we give 2 examples of the grid should support when it starts operating, and I suggest those are.
Yes, we could use those mentioned in the scope of the project from the very beginning.
That's a fairly long list, though, right?
I mean, I think there were only 4.
Okay, well, I can revisit it, but the idea is you go live when the UN CEFACT have said yes, make this happen, with even if you just had one type of registrar in it,
Okay, or if we mention business and land, that should be enough to
that's what I'm
orient.
thinking. Because if we say 4 and we've only got 3 of them, do they say you're not ready to go live yet?
Yeah.
You know, like, well, we can be useful with 2. Probably be useful with 1.
If we mention business and land, that should be more than enough. Right?
Cool. Good. Thank you.
And
Okay.
bicycle.
Now, the other thing that I haven't really walked through, and I don't know whether we should right now, is that I'll stop this being a split view. So reviews. I'll zoom in a bit.
Pilots.
So I created before Christmas, actually, and I've been tweaking it pretty well ever since. A pilot architecture that is very much a prototype. So what it does is it allows this logical model to be kind of played with. So it allows participants, so these are separate registrars participating in the program, in the pilot program. It allows these to publish data under their control and sign it. So they each individually publish and sign data with their own documents. And then there's a process that we run, what they call harvest. It reads that data periodically, and it checks the signature to make sure that it was signed by the participant we believe should be the participant for that registrar. And then if it's correct, in the signature sense, it then updates the grid. So an example grid here that we're sort of generating. This is generated by the software right now, by the platform. And the grid has a number of columns to it. You can download the raw data file as a CSV, but it sort of says the purpose of the pilot. Did we verify the certificate associated with that registrar, and what is the database? Each registrar that participates in the pilot, they would publish a sample data, make it available, and then we put it into the grid. And that's pretty well the way the grid would work operationally. And I created fictitious countries, UN member states. I created fictitious UN member states and gave them some sort of background information and some other things so that the grid data appears. Now, you can, this is again populated by the process, but the actual files, I'll zoom in again. The actual files have a bit more guts to them. So that they have this bit at the beginning. That's the machine readable bit at the beginning. So the code reads those bits and uses those bits to populate the table, and then it uses this text to create a README kind of file that corresponds to that registrar. So the sort of process that a registry would do is to create a GitHub or GitLab repo, create a public key that signs that content, share the public key with us. We read their repo occasionally and we pull in the data that they're using. And it just gives a visualization of that process that is at the heart of this diagram. So that's what the pilot is able to do right now. We've got a pilot program, which is also described here. So there's an architecture.
So do we have any requirements for the pilot projects or specifications?
What I want to happen, and this is why I'm glad that Gondolier is on the call as well, and yourself, Alina, is the pilots that have expressed interest, those nation states, member states that have expressed interest, feed us the requirements. Say, oh no, that's not the way I expect it to work. It needs to do this. Or they say, okay, if I do that, what happens? So the idea of the prototype environment is to experiment.
Because it might be that they want to develop it in a different manner. But of course, on the other hand, maybe we should establish like minimum sort of requirements for these pilot projects?
So if every pilot develops a different thing, then we don't kind of have a grid, right? So there are two parts that a pilot might want to experiment with. One is the use of the digital identity anchor,
Yes.
and the other is the interface to the grid. So I've really only designed a support for an interface to a grid.
Okay.
And the use of the DIA, the only aspect that this pilot talks about with the use of the DIA is anticipates there being a DID that's published by the participant that says what keys they're using to sign the DIAs. But you can give the link to the technical team about, on technical teams for India and Spain, about these design decisions and how it works. And both of them, we want a dialogue. Around, okay, that's not quite, we do it this way and we tweak the pilot. But this is very much a prototype environment. So it gets changed by requests from participants to sort of reflect the way it needs to work. We then find out what the best sort of way of working would be grid. There are some nice advantages about this design that come out of it. One is if the grid goes down, it doesn't affect the drug at all. And the information they've made available for the grid will be available to other participants still anyway. So people can still read the available description of themselves, the keys they use and everything else, because we don't want to have a single point of failure. So the grid that doesn't sort of doesn't, if it were to go down, disruption for the participants in their operation, and still accessible. So there's a few other things about the grid design, fairly cool. But what I think it needs is the technical pilot team to critique it and crawl over it and say, no, do it that way. We'll do this.
Yeah, we would have to move that.
And it also has this as a pilot participant guide. So how do you become a participant? What do you do? So I've got, if I can answer, I can bring it over. I've got these several countries that I'm running that aren't real. One of them is Genovia, and the way it should work is bring another thing in. So this is a completely different GitLab. Not on the UNRCC platform, and I've created this fictitious country, Genovia, and this repo, which has two registrars in it, is what drives this. Oh, not that one. Drives the content of the grid. So the grid read my environment and populated these two rows about the Ministry of Genovia companies and how they write identifiers and what they did is, and I've obviously got a problem with one of my signatures because something went wrong when I signed it. So that's why you need a point of contact saying, we've got an error with your company's registrar, what's happening, yeah, and so on. So there's a sort of bunch of things. Now, what's true for this prototype is I'm populating data even if we could have an operating principle that says the grid never shows data that hasn't been signed and checked. So it would never show the data. And therefore a country, a nation state member might disappear or not be updated. So that's why this approach lets us play with the way it's working anger. You know, if a harvesting process fails on 2 or 3 occasions for a country, what you do, you ring them, or you call them, or you contact them, or whatever. You find out why they're not communicating, and so you have these operational procedures that get flushed out and playing with the prototype. So that's my end requirement. But I do really want, I know you have a team, Alina, that are working on it, and I think Gondolier, maybe others in India things too. I'd love people to kind of crawl over the ideas in this architecture. Hopefully start playing.
Yes.
I've spoken way too much again today, so I'm going to pause for a second. And Alina and Gondolier, what else you haven't talked about yet?
Of course, I just had a look at this fourth section. Then we would also have to have an overview of the third one regarding the digital identity anchor. I was also looking at that one. Let me check. As I mentioned, I like how you named it, Trust Wrapper, because it avoids confusions, as many people were complaining about the. I don't know if we would have to add anything here regarding this other identifier, like a sort of how did we name that? Not hierarchy, but. Do you remember I was mentioning that many people were concerned about the European identifier and
So
what?
yeah,
Yes.
and what there are several ways we can address it. There's the generic way where we say
Yes.
this is a new identifier, it can be a container for identifiers in here as many, or maybe only one if you're harming. But this example shows some identifiers inside a
Yes.
DIA. Now we could put an EU ID in there just to dispel concern, right? We could give an example of an EU ID. It's sort of it should be obvious that if we said any identifier could be in the DIA, any issued identifier from the authoritative registry we put in. And remember, we have three data in the proposal. One is where, so you see this word here about asserted, so trust level asserted, or verified. So this the content where the authoritative registrar has signed something and has committed to it. This is the identifier for this organization. That's the one where they're legally liable, and it's there. It's the ML-ETR kind of rules you're describing around equivalency to published physical data and so on. Where Steve and others we may have gone too far is we're suggesting that you might want to allow the applicant to say, well, you've also got an LEI, and we've also got some other stuff, and the registrar then has whether to acknowledge that other stuff at all, and also verify it. So we've allowed three types of things. One is where they are under absolute control, so that they have a sort of responsibility for the accuracy of the data in it. The second is where they verify at the point in time we checked, yes, that LEI corresponded to that business. And the third is we were given this, but we haven't checked it.
Like if you would add anything regarding the digital identity anchor, such as that it does not replace, duplicate existing identifiers such as VLI, European ones, GS1 or whatever.
Yeah, well, we put that up pretty well at the beginning. And we've got it, I think, later on as well. But to say if we say in one sentence, it is not a new identifier, it does not create a new identifier. I think every other type of identifier is covered by that statement.
Okay. Yes.
But we can, for the sake of clarity, list some examples of identifiers that it does not replace. But that's
or
be exhaustive, right?
yes. Because this, as I mentioned, this was the main concern of my board, because they said that we are already in this We Build project, and they do not want problems with the European Commission regarding the use of the European identifiers. So yeah, but I don't know, maybe other countries will also consider this matter. I don't know.
So the concept here is that any identifier that is recognized by the authority to register that can include EU ID Spain, as I know is working as an LOU. So you could issue an organization an LEI if they ask for one, and you can issue them with a Spanish business identifier as a matter of course, because you have to if that's the normal product, I suppose, of the request. So they now have the standard requirement: you must have a Spanish business identifier, a Spanish business. Here's the identifier. That's the legal authority and responsibility of registradores. And they go, well, we'd like an LEI too. Okay.
The word I was looking for was coexistence. Like if we would need to specify anything about the coexistence with other identifier. But I think if you said that it's a trust wrapper, it's not necessary, since we
I know, and I worry about
name it specifically identifier. So yeah,
I worry in some sense about the more we say, the more risk there is of misinterpretation. Surprisingly, the shorter and simpler we can make the statement, the less open it is to misinterpretation. So the simple thing I'm trying to express is a authoritative registrar goes through its normal process to recognize the application by some business or person, and it decides if it's going to recognize it and register it. That's its process. We don't change that. The output of its registration, if it's successful, is some form of identifier that recognizes that registration. And that identifier is their business. We have no say over what that looks like, what it is. It could be an EU ID, it could be their own construction, it could be an ABN in Australia. We don't care. But the identifier they use is their authoritative declaration of identifier, and they kind of sign themselves to it. If the organization has asked for other identifiers to either be issued to them or recognized, so registradores could issue an LEI because they're an LOU with life, then that's a perfectly reasonable thing to request. That an LEI could be generated or issued, and now there are two things that could be included in the DIA. The first is the form initial identifier. The second is the LEI, and if there's an EU ID, they can have an EU ID as well, and they can pay for it. It's not a for any of these things.
yes,
It doesn't conflict with them. It doesn't compete with them. It wraps them.
it wraps them.
In a nice warm hug.
I love this word.
Anyway, so that's probably quite enough on the but I will repeat, I guess, what I said a while ago. We need to I do, and the package and so maybe push through that merge that I've got waiting to name the files a bit more sensibly and to present content in a way I hope makes more sense for fresh readers. And then to you and others that are interested, can you please review the document again, just to sort of now check to see, does it make sense when people go through it? And in parallel, Sankishan and I will work through any remaining open issues from that first review to say, well, I think we fixed it. Did we actually fix it? Let's check to see whether the revised text addresses that issue from Brett.
Actually, I like the structure. It's quite simple and clear.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you. But it can always improve things, right? So
Yes.
so we'll push through. This is that we're actually looking at the my local build of this thing. So we'll push through that merge so it looks like this on the website, the public website, and then we'll ping everybody to say it's ready. Can you have a look at the video?
Okay, I will send the link to my team as well and see what they think.
Especially for the pilot stuff, please, Alina. I'd love to get some feedback on the pilot.
Yes, to get some feedback on the pilot. Okay.
Va bene. I can't think of it in Spanish. I can only think Italian. Sorry.
That's similar. Muy bien.
Okay, muy bien. Good.
Muy bien.
Well, thank you very much. I propose calling quits on this. It's been really good for me, at least. I hope it was okay for everybody else. And I'll see you on the next call.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you.
Thanks, Dankeschön.
Have a nice day. Have a nice day, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you very much, Lena. Thank you.